Looking back, was Cartoon Network's City era really that great? Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. By the way, all respect to everyone in here that commented, like Mr. Man Guy and anyone else in here. I haven't really read this yet. This is going to be my first time looking at this. But I just found this because it was recent post. It was from January. It was like a little over 2 weeks ago. So this topic just really intrigued me. Because I'm a big fan of Sea and City. In my opinion, it's the best era of the network. It's tied between that and Powerhouse. So I'm curious to see what he's going to say, and I kind of want to get into it, and I kind of would like to talk about it, have a conversation about it, and just kind of see kind of what we get into here. I'm also rocking the Cartoon Network shirt because got to rock that life. Cartoon Network's City era, lasting from 2004 to 2007, is fondly remembered by many fans for its brilliant premise. Okay, so he's acknowledging its brilliant premise, okay. The brand identity, developed jointly by Primal Screen and Amalogic, was introduced in 2004 alongside a new logo and presented the network's programming as one big town that all the cartoon characters lived in. Bumpers would regularly have characters from various shows interacting with each other in various skits and adventures. It gave the network a sense of community and made Cartoon Network stand out from any other channel on cable dial. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that 1,000%. Yes, it did. But while the on-air packaging was fantastic, I think the actual programming during this era left a lot to be desired. I see. Okay, and I think I know exactly where he's going with this, but let's carry on. 2002 to 2007 was an odd time for Cartoon Network as a channel. The network, which had built its house as the home to the best animation has to offer, excuse me, I'm still going over a cold, was starting to struggle against other kids' channels like a resurgent Nickelodeon and a new cable darling, Disney Channel. Now, I just want to say real quick, Cartoon Network, statistically speaking, there's not a single channel that can stay on top, that can remain top dog forever. Like, you think Nickelodeon was just always gonna stay second fiddle? You think Nickelodeon was just looking over there across the aisle and being like, that Cartoon Network will never catch up now? No, Nickelodeon was always going to try to outdo and outperform Cartoon Network. And with a lot of their programming, they did. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender was phenomenal, right? And Nicktoons Network in that same time frame was really starting to pop off. 2009 Nicktoons Network, I mean, that's something that's hailed, right? As like one of the best times of Nicktoons. But Nickelodeon just in general, yeah, they were popping off a lot of cool hits. Drake and Josh was super popular at the time. I don't think iCarly was out yet, but Zoe 101 was popping at the time. A lot of their live action stuff was popping. SpongeBob was in like the height of its success at the time. I mean, Nickelodeon really had a lot going for them. And Disney Channel too. I mean, you had Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, That's So Raven, like shows that were very popular. It's not that Cartoon Network suffered a decline. It's that the competition surrounding Cartoon Network continued to improve, right? It just became a much more competitive landscape, which I thought was fine. Because guess what? Cartoon Network, if all you do is just watch Cartoon Network, right? And it's always top dog, it's going to get boring after a while. You want Cartoon Network to suffer a bit, right? So that you change the channel and not only get to experience Nickelodeon, but if Cartoon Network suffers a bit, it gives them a chance to go back up even higher, right? As such, the network, which had once appealed to animation fans of all ages with its broad-based approach to cartoons, began segmenting shows into its walled gardens with daytime aimed at kids 2 to 11, primetime for 6 to 11, and Adult Swim for overnight 18 to 34. The tween skewing Toonami lineup got kicked to Saturday nights, and in its place on weekdays was the softer Magoozy as part of the new kid-focused mandate. Now, let me just say, softer Magoozy. I mean, I get what he's saying. If we're talking bumpers, right? Sure. A space robot commanding a ship that shows episodes of Dragon Ball Z, right? Versus a little girl inside of an underwater dome with like, fun little aliens, right? Sure. That part is softer. I'll give you that. But like, let's look at the lineup, right? Maguzi had what, like Ben 10, Pokemon. Pokemon was a show also on Toonami, right? Megas XLR, I believe, was on Maguzi. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2003 was on Maguzi. That's definitely not a softer show. It was also a show that was on Toonami at a point or two, I believe. I don't understand quite that argument, to be frank. Classic cartoons slowly started disappearing from the channel's lineup, replaced with more contemporary acquisitions, reruns of originals, and repurposing Kids WB shows. More contemporary acquisitions. I don't know what you mean by that. Unless he means like, okay, so he's no longer talking about Maguzi. Okay, so he's talking about the network again. Classic cartoons slowly started disappearing from the channel's lineup. Okay, but they didn't disagree from the channel entirely. I mean, like, the City era itself has tons of bumpers and promos showcasing lots of the older tunes. And here's what you have to understand, right? Cartoon Network in the City era was ramping up to be one of the network's most successful years of its of pretty much its lifetime. I mean, and you can tell how successful the network was doing due to the production effort that they put into Cartoon Network Fridays. For those who've been missing out on our live streams recently, we've been rewatching a lot of older episodes of Cartoon Network Fridays. Not Cartoon Fridays, Cartoon Network Fridays. And when you see how many music guests were on there, when you see, like, my goodness, the Class of 3000 premiere had to have costed him $500,000 easily. I think that the network was trying to enter a time of really trying to branch itself out, right? So replace with more contemporary acquisitions. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about that is you got to try something, right? Flintstones. We know Flintstones works, right? We know it works. We know it works because it's been around since, what, the 40s, right? We know it works. It's almost 100 years old at this point. 15 years away. We know it works. How about we try something that we don't know if it works, right? Like, I get it. A lot of people didn't like Squirrel Boy. A lot of people didn't like My Gym Partner's a Monkey. I get it. But guess what? They didn't know that at the time, that people weren't going to like those shows. So they gave them a chance to succeed. I liked those shows personally. But they gave them a chance. You know the old phrase, you don't know until you try, right? So, did they replace them with more contemporary acquisitions? I don't know if I agree with that verbiage. Perhaps, but again, you got to switch things up. You got to change things up. I mean, look at Boomerang. Boomerang is basically dead. Has been basically dead for going on almost 20 years, right? Because, look, I love classics, right? I love classics. But 20 years? It gets tiring after a while. Can I get something new? You know? And I mean, let me say this. Cartoons were still stuck around. Reruns of originals. I don't understand. Classic cartoons slowly disappearing from the channel's lineup, and then you say reruns of originals. I don't understand. I don't quite understand. Or repurposing Kids WB shows, which he's saying, like, shows like The Batman, one of the things like that. I mean, sure, but you could say that for Cartoon Network's heyday with Fox. I mean, look, we got the Beetlejuice cartoon. It wasn't a Cartoon Network original. They got the Mask cartoon. I'm talking back in the checkerboard era, by the way. Flintstones that came out in the 40s, that came out 52 years earlier than Cartoon Network was even a thing. And it was thrown on there, and it was one of Cartoon Network's biggest staples. That wasn't a Cartoon Network original. Like, Cartoon Network in and of itself has always repurposed other shows while in addition to creating new shows. I don't understand that argument. I really don't. I mean, for crying out loud, Dragon Ball Z, Toonami in its entirety, repurposed shows from an entire other country. How many shows did we get in the later half of the 2000s that were all from Canada, from YTV, right? And the original programming that was launched during this time was a bit of a mixed bag. Okay, that's a perfectly fine opinion to have. Absolutely, I'll give him that. Even though I liked a lot of the shows that came out, right? That's a fair opinion to have. Absolutely. And there's a lot of people. Here's the thing: there's a lot of people that share that opinion, right? A lot of people, even in my own chat on streams, a lot of people don't like a lot of the shows that came out in 04 to 06 or 07. A lot of people didn't like them, and I get it. I get it. Sure, you had classics like Teen Titans, Foster Home for Imaginary Friends, Naruto, Justice League Unlimited, Megas XLR, and Ben 10. Which, by the way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One, two, three. 6 shows he liked versus 3 shows he didn't. Oh, I'm sorry. 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 shows he didn't. All right. Let me read his full second comment here. But for everyone else, you had completely forgettable fare like My Gym Partner's a Monkey and Hi Puffy Amiyumi, or shows with big investment but no traction like Duck Dodgers, Life and Times of Juniper Lee, or Class 3000. Okay, here's the thing. Here's the thing about the argument of completely forgettable fare. Can you say My Gym Partner's a Monkey and Hi Puffy Amiyumi were completely forgettable? Can you say that? Absolutely. I would also say Life and Times of Juniper Lee was also very forgettable, and I love that show, right? But let's be fair. Let's go back to Checkerboard or Powerhouse. How many people genuinely, and I'm not talking about hardcore fans like you and I, if we're really talking about things that are completely forgettable, how many people genuinely remember Mike Luadog? That was a cartoon. How many people genuinely remember Sheep in the Big City? Genuinely remember that show? How many people? Right? So I mean, let's not pretend that Cartoon Network from 92 to 2001 was like it could do no wrong. Like let's not pretend that. I mean, again, this is his opinion. It's fair to have, and I agree with him that shows like My Gym Partner's a Monkey and Hi Puffy Amiyumi and Juniper Lee were forgettable. I 100% agree with that. But to pretend that, and I don't even know if this is his statement. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but this is what it kind of seems like he's going for. To pretend that Cartoon Network of old did not have shows that were forgettable, I don't agree with. Or shows with big investment but no traction. Duck Dodgers was forgettable. And I love the 2000s Duck Dodgers. Was forgettable. Lifetime's Juniper Lee or Class of 3000. Class of 3000, here's the thing. So I don't really know what big investment went into Duck Dodgers or Lifetime's Juniper Lee. I really don't. I really don't. But I do know Class of 3000 had huge investment. I don't know. I mean, I suppose it had. I don't know. I don't know about no traction. I see where he's going though. I would say Class of 3000. If we want to talk shows from City era, I think Class of 3000 is definitely more memorable than the other ones that you listed. But I see where you're going. I'll give you that. I'll let you have that one. This was. Excuse me. Let me get some water. Still coming over this cold, man. This was also the time Cartoon Network slowly began injecting live action into its lineup, airing a variety of cartoon-like, fantasy-like, some questionable acquisitions of Zix. I don't remember Zix. Goosebumps. Okay. Goosebumps. That's fair. Okay, but here's the thing about that is Here's how I look at shows like Goosebumps airing on Cartoon Network. I don't have an issue with it because of twofold. One, and I talk about this a lot on my live streams. You have to look at Cartoon Network as what it is, right? It's a business. What's the point of a business? The point of a business is to make money, right? That is the sole purpose of a business, right? Can you get other things done in addition to making money? Absolutely. And Cartoon Network did do that for 30 years, right? Over 30 years. But at the end of the day, a network is a business, right? So if they're looking across the aisle, if they're looking across the street, and they see Nickelodeon with shows like Pete and Pete, Drake and Josh, all these things, or what was theirs? They had Are You Afraid of the Dark? I don't see an issue with Cartoon Network trying to air Goosebumps, especially during Halloween. I really don't see an issue with that. Personally, I loved watching Goosebumps on Cartoon Network growing up. Personally, and I didn't think twice about it, to be honest with you. And because it's based on a book, and because, let's be honest, if you watch Goosebumps, it is so cheesy. The acting, the special effects are so corny. It's almost like a cartoon. And I know that kind of sounds like, I know what that sounds like. I know that kind of sounds like I'm hardcore. What's the word? Cope. And maybe, right? I'll give you that. Maybe it's a maybe. But that's how I always looked at Goosebumps, and I'm just being honest with you. I'm just being real. I always looked at Goosebumps as kind of, it's a live action, sure. Oh, he even says cartoon like, right? So him and I at least agree here. I mean, I'll let you have that, but I don't think it's as big of an issue as it's being made to be. I don't remember Zix. I don't know what that is. It clearly was not big enough for me to remember it. Slowly began injecting live action into his lineup, and that's fair. And if he talks about Cartoon Network Fridays, we'll get into that. I think the ultimate problem with Jim Samples' Cartoon Network was that the channel didn't know what it wanted to be. Let me listen to this. Under Betty Cohen, it was a network made by cartoon fans for cartoon fans. Yes, yes. I agree. Because Betty Cohen did to Cartoon Network what Jerry Beck is doing to MeTV Toons right now. Under Stuart Snyder, it was an edgy, male-skewing kids network. Under Christina Miller, it was purely a kids network with an animation focus. Okay? But under Samples, was it a kids network? An animation channel? A kids animation channel? A boys network? An action network? Is it any wonder why of the dozen or so original series that came out of City Samples era of CN, only about 3 had any lasting impact? Here's the thing about that. Jim Samples didn't make the shows. He didn't make them, right? People came with their own cartoon ideas, and they liked them, and they brought them on, right? Same as Betty Cohen would have done, I'm sure. Do you really think, like, My Gym Partner's a Monkey and Betty, what other show did you say you didn't like? Hi Hi Puffy Amiyumi, or Squirrel Boy. Do you really think these shows would have never gone on Cartoon Network if Betty Cohen was always in charge? Do you really think Betty Cohen would have been like, Squirrel Boy? Pfft, nah. I'm not so sure about that. I'm really not. I want to finish his comment before I talk any farther. While Cohen, Snyder, and even Miller, to an extent, were pumping out hit after hit, it's not that City era of Cartoon Network was bad, it's just that the network during this period had a bit of an identity crisis and was flailing around to figure out exactly what it was trying to do. Meanwhile, Nick and Disney, who both had very firm and definitive mission statements during this time, were surpassing them in ratings. Is that true? Is that I really do not think that's true. I really don't. I really don't think that's true at all. I really don't. Now, as for the rest of this, I'm going to get to it. And okay, I'm sorry. By the way, hold on a minute. Snyder and even Miller, to an extent, were pumping out hit after hit. What are we doing here? Snyder had CN Real. And look, I liked a lot of CN Real, but hit after hit? Cartoon Network's Reanimated. Well, that might have been Jim Samples. So I'll give you that because it did come out during City Era. It might not have though. Well, I know it came out during City Era, but it might not have been Samples. But okay, trying to think of what else. Miller, Christina Miller. Well, I mean, let's think of the Secret Mountain Fort Awesome. Forgettable. Hit after hit. Problem Solvers, hit after hit. Is that what we're Uncle Grandpa, hit after hit. What are we talking about here? I don't think I'm being honest. I don't think we're being very fair. I don't. Because here's the thing: is I understand this person's criticism. I do. I really do. I understand their criticism here. For Jim Samples, because guess what? None of us are perfect, guys. And as much as I love Sin City, it is fully able and available to be criticized, as is Jim Samples. Absolutely. I don't think that we're being very fair here, if I'm being honest. Snyder, hit after hit. Miller, hit after hit. Come on. Come on. It's not that the City of Cartoon Network is bad. Okay, yeah, we already finished that. I wanted to talk about what he talked about here about them having an identity crisis. I completely disagree. Not only do I completely disagree, I 180 disagree. I think Cartoon Network had finally found its identity and they were more confident than ever about who they were. It was even in their brand slogan packaging, right? What did the over-announcer say all the time during the City Era? This is Cartoon Network. They knew exactly who they were. They knew exactly who their audience was. They knew exactly who to market to, when, where, how, and why. I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't disagree more. We're going to move on. Under Jim Samples, I feel Cartoon Network appealed to all demographics, continuation and perhaps extension of Cohen's reign, so I don't think the City Era is bad by any means. I agree, because don't forget, you had shows like Baby Looney Tunes make its debut during this time frame. The difference was that the Cohen era did it through shows that worked for multiple age groups at once, like the Powerpuff Girls. Okay, but again, Betty Cohen didn't make the Powerpuff Girls. That's not a fair argument. Like, let's just say, for example, Craig McCracken didn't make the Powerpuff Girls until, 7 years later. Let's imagine a hypothetical timeline where 7 years later, he never made the Powerpuff Girls. So Powerpuff Girls never debuted during the Cohen era. It debuted during the Jim Samples era, right? Your opinion on both eras would completely change. Or maybe it wouldn't, and maybe you'd say something completely different. Maybe you wouldn't like the Powerpuff Girls. I don't know. But, again, I don't think that's fair. She didn't make the Powerpuff Girls. It just so happens that the idea came across the table when she was in office. I don't think that's fair. Younger kids get a funny Monster of the Week superhero comedy, while teens and adults get a clever, fast-paced satire of superhero tropes. I mean, yeah, that's a great summary of why people love the Powerpuff Girls. Absolutely. But under Samples, all the shows were boxed into tightly organized day parts with little potential for crossover appeal among shows like in the Powerhouse days. I disagree heavily. Because how can you say with little potential for crossover appeal? The entire branding of Cartoon Network City was a crossover. That was the whole thing. That was the whole shebang. That was all of it, was a crossover. Not even a potential for crossover. And what did you miss the event? The alien invading event? Where you literally had a group of alien invaders that went to every show during the latter end of the City era? That was huge crossover. And, you want us to point to the Powerpuff Girls for the Cohen era. Okay, why don't we point to the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy for the Jim Samples era, right? Or, Well, they might say that, oh, well, that started in. Again, I don't think that that's very fair. I don't. I also disagree. I mean, because you can look at shows also like Juniper Lee, right? I could make a very similar statement to what he typed out here for Juniper Lee. I could make a very similar statement to what he typed out right here about shows like Megas XLR, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is, we can sit here all day long and say, well, Mind Your Partner's a Monkey sucked. Oh, or was forgettable. Okay, well, Mike Lou and Og wasn't very great and it was forgettable. Okay, well, we can sit here and go back and forth all day. You know what I mean? I just don't think it really does anything, to be honest. Because again, this show could. What if I'm just throwing this out there to play devil's advocate? What if Powerpuff Girls came out 7 years later? You wouldn't be able to use this argument, right? Boxed into tightly organized day parts with little potential for crossover among the shows. I don't get that. Kids during most of the day. Toonami for tweens, teens on Saturday nights. And Adult Swim, which would be branded as a standalone network for samples for adults after 11 p.m. The whole channel felt a little too compartmentalized demographically during the City era. I think this contributed to the identity crisis phenomena Cartoon Network had under samples. I don't understand how having variety is a bad thing. I don't understand how saying that, and I get his argument, right? Because a show like Powerpuff Girls is a show that can be enjoyed by everybody. For sure. For sure. Absolutely. I agree with you. I think a majority of the cartoons are shows that can be enjoyed by anybody and everybody. I agree. But the fact of the matter is, right? A 30-year-old man is not watching the Powerpuff Girls on his own unless he's got kids. It's just not happening, right? As much as I wish it would, as much as I'm sure everyone in the comment section probably wish it would, let's just be real. It's not happening. It's not happening. That's just not something that's happening, right? So them creating Adult Swim created not just an additional avenue for viewership, but a potential avenue for revenue, which allowed the network, more revenue means the network can do more cool and big things, right? Which, by the way, the money that they got, I think Cartoon Network during the City era was the richest the network has ever been, because. And again, I think that kind of throws a wrench into the argument of they were struggling to find an identity. When you look at Atlanta and we were watching an episode of Fridays on Stream where they had this whole setup in Atlanta that was the Ed's cul-de-sac with fences all put up and these little baseball field where it's high above Yamayumi and Foster's home, and they had more of an identity during the City era than ever before. I don't get that argument. And again, I think that them sanctioning things off like that, I mean, for crying out loud, you need a block. How many people, when talking about Cartoon Network, talk about Toonami and the importance of Toonami? How many times have you heard the story, oh, I ran home from school to watch the newest episode of Dragon Ball Z? How many times have you heard that story? Time and time and time again. For millions of kids. Millions. So to say that it felt compartmentalized demographically, and that it had an identity crisis, tell that to the kids who ran home to watch Toonami every day after school. You think they thought it was going through an identity crisis? I don't think so. I don't think so. I just don't. I wouldn't say that about Miller, considering how the show is considerably varied in quality. Yeah, I said that earlier. considerably varied in quality when she ran the network. If nothing else, Miller greenlit several cult hits like We Bare Bears, OKKO, Apple and Onion. Brother, I mean this completely respectfully. The same way we talked about how My Gym Partner's a Monkey and Hi Hi Puffy Yo Mimi were completely forgettable. Like, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest with each other here. Are we remembering Apple and Onion in about 10 years? Are we remembering that show was ever a thing? I gotta be completely honest with you. This show's not even 10 years old. I barely forget about it. I forget about Apple and Onion. I forget about Mighty Magiswords. I forget about Mao Mao. There's a lot of shows I forget about. Right? And again, I think greenlit several cult hits. I mean, okay, well, we could do the same thing for samples. That's why I said we can sit here. We can do this all day. We can sit here and go back and forth. We're just going to be playing a chess game that never ends in a checkmate. It's a forever ending check, 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 check. It never ends. You can't keep doing that. It's never gonna, it's never gonna end. If nothing else, that's his comment. I actually deleted that part of my initial post where he responded to think about what I had written a little bit more. Previous presidents Cartoon Network had done the same as well. So what I wrote seemed rather reductive and dismissive. Mea culpa. Okay. I still don't think it was too bad. I can see your arguments about removing most classic cartoons and moving too many Saturday nights, but as a whole, I think it still worked well. It did. Technically, We Bare Bears were greenlit under Stuart Snyder in March 2014 as one of the shows he greenlit. See, that's what I'm saying. That's why it's not a. That's why I had to double check myself, and I was like, well, hold on a minute. Was such and such show under Cohen or was it under Samples? You know what I mean? It's too much of a. You have to put this under a microscope for it to really even matter anyway. Here's my post on how often each show aired during 04 and 07. Okay, that might be something helpful for a later post. I agree with a lot of the points you said. The City era was CNI. I don't know. These are all very good points. I'd argue that City era CN really wanted to be strictly for kids network. What? With anything meant for adults cordoned off to Adult Swim. You can see a lot of the problems of later eras start to form there. Okay, here's the thing I need a lot of people to keep in mind as well, right? Ratings for television do not remain the same. They change, and they change pretty frequently. I think the day and age we're in now, I think is the slowest ratings have ever been changing, because they still change, but they've been changing at a much slower rate. If we're talking 90s to 2000s, look at shows like Batman the Animated Series or Spider-Man the Animated Series, and then look at shows that came out in like 2008. Well, you still had Star Wars The Clone Wars. I don't know. What you have to understand is that a lot of those rating systems change, right? So you can't keep making the same kinds of adult-oriented content for shows, right? For adults. But here's the thing. Anyone who watched any show on Cartoon Network during this era, they were all shows adults could watch. Which is funny, because the person that he's saying he agrees with probably disagrees with him. Because he just talked about how, or this other guy talked about how Powerpuff Girls was a show that could be enjoyed by kids and adults. Okay, well, what are you talking about then? And again, respectfully, strictly for Kids Network with anything meant for adults cordoned off to Adult Swim. Well, Powerpuff Girls isn't meant for adults, right? Like, what are we, and then like Ed, Edd n Eddy, that's a show that can be enjoyed for both. There's a lot of adult jokes in Ed, Edd n Eddy. I don't know what we're doing here. This wouldn't really be as much of a problem if the network had a clear vision like it did during the Snyder era. I don't know what he means. Where they decided to go on an all-boy focused image. But this was a horrible idea. You know, I made a video about this like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and what's so funny, this is true, by the way. So much so to the point where it was borderline sexist, because they released a interview article or something. Again, it's a really old video on my channel where they talked about how they didn't want to make any shows that targeted the female demographic because, and I quote, girls don't buy toys. So to the point where, what was that one live action show they did? Unreal Society or something like that. Unreal History, I think it was. Man, my chest is killing me. They had to do a lot of reshoots for that show, and they said because they had to put. I really hope I'm getting this right. I really hope it was that show. But they said they had to put girls to the back, behind the boy characters. They wanted the boy characters to the forefront. They had a clear... If you want to say they had a clear vision in that, sure. I don't think that's a great vision to have. I don't. Because how can you say girls don't buy toys when Powerpuff Girls has more merchandise than any other Cartoon Network show? I mean, the only thing that I think even remotely rivals it, or maybe even slightly could surpass it, is Ben 10. Right? But I think that Powerpuff Girls, I mean, dude, there's watches, there's dresses, there's shirts, there's other apparel, there's toys, there's figures. Like, but Cartoon Network in the City era just lacked any real direction. I don't get that. It felt like they were just flailing around trying to find an identity post Adult Swim. I couldn't disagree with that more. I couldn't. I mean, again, this is Cartoon Network. They knew exactly who they were. Which is part of why most of its shows from this era went completely forgotten. Again, I disagree. And again, even if you're right, there are shows in every era that will go completely forgotten. Sheep in the Big City, Mike, Lou, and Og. Remember the Moxie show? Yeah, who remembers that? You know, and he wants to say Mind Your Partner's a Monkey, Squirrel Boy, Juniper Lee. Sure, I'll give you those. Why not? You know, Apple and Onion, Problem Solvers, Uncle Grandpa. Like, you can't tell me those, like, every network has shows that are going to be forgotten. Because guess what? If you release 10 shows, they are not all going to be home runs. That is statistically impossible. Statistically impossible. They're all different shows made for written by different people, written, you know, with people with completely different personalities, shows that are about completely different things, aimed at completely different types of kids. They are not all going to be home runs, right? Just a fact. You can't do that. I feel like that's so unfair. Okay, that's just him talking about Primal Scream. Every era had some shows that gained little to no following. Didn't we just say that? Every era has some shows that gained little to no following. Even Betty Cohen era with shows like Mike, Lou, and Og or Robot Jones. What mattered was that City era still had a lot of shows with a lot of very good shows. So for every gym partner, you had 2 or 3 shows. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I agree. The City era was really great from 2004 to 2006. When Yes era took over as the main block, City era became a shell of its former self. Okay, that's neither here nor there. Is that the same Dragoon that I think? If so, nice. I thought shows like Foster and for Imaginary Friends, Camp Loves, Ben 10 were all remembered, plus shows in the final days, Powerhouse, K&D, Billy and Manny, Teen Titans. Teen Titans was on Powerhouse? Huh. Ed and Eddie, Codename Kids Next Door, Billy and Mandy, and Teen Titans continuing from the previous era combined with Foster's, which did debut during the era, really carried the City era on its back. Once Teen Titans ended, it passed the torch to Ben 10, while everything else remained the same. I agree with you overall, Mr. Man Guy, and I'll be honest, I've always been middle ground with my opinion. I never agreed with the CN died in 2004 crowd, because that narrative was terrible and never made any sense at all, because he still had so many originals going on, plus having Toonami on Saturdays was better than nothing. Miguzi's theme may not have been good, but the shows the block had were still awesome. Totally Spies, TMNT3, yeah, Static Shock is incredible. Code Lyoko, I mean, come on. You also had the epic Summer of 2005 event. What this was, by the way, Cartoon Network. this Summer of 2005 blows the argument of Cartoon Network doesn't know who they were completely out of the water. Because Summer of 2005, this event was when Cartoon Network was on top of the frickin' world. They didn't just know who they were. They knew who they were, and they loved every minute of it. Fridays with Tommy and Tara was still amazing, even if it wasn't on CCF's level. I disagree with that. I think Tommy and Tara's Fridays is actually superior to CCF, but that's a video for another day. Heck, I don't care if it was part of Adult Swim. Robot Chicken and Boondocks premiering in 2005 was a big deal as well. Agreed, because if we're going to critique Cartoon Network during the City era versus the Betty Cohen era of Powerhouse and Checkerboard, you got to compare the whole network, right? At the same time, I never considered CN City as the golden age or CN's peak, and that's a fair opinion to have. I noticed a lot of people across YouTube and other social media platforms over the years put too much emphasis on the bumpers when reminiscing CN City, rather than talking about the programming. As a kid, watching Cartoon Network, you didn't even know what eras were. That's something you don't learn about till years later. You get on the internet forums and learn what the phases of CN were named. Ultimately, you were there to watch the shows. The programming mattered most, which was a big step down compared to what the Powerhouse era had overall. This is a very fair opinion to have. 100%. You know what? If me and this guy, MGQ 96, is this, wait a minute. 296? Is that you? Might be. If him and I had a conversation, I would probably agree with him on a lot of things. Because, look, I just said Powerhouse. In my opinion, it's Powerhouse, City. See this? See that? City is just barely, right? So that means to me, we're going either way, right? So I might agree with him on a lot of things here. That would have to be a separate conversation. I mean, I still think City had a lot of variety. I still think City's schedule had a lot going for it, to be honest. The concept of characters interacting with each other was nothing new in CN City. The only difference was that CN City focused on mainly originals in full CGI City, while Powerhouse had them interacting around the live studios in Atlanta, cartoons mixed with Hanna-Barbera. I think CN City bumpers were the greatest bumpers ever created for the network, but it had no reflection on how the programming was actually like, which mattered the most. That's fair, because I think he's referring to the fact that we didn't really get a lot of Flintstones sprinkled in, even though we did. Did we get a lot of it? No. But again, I think that I think it was time to move on. You know, I mean, you can't. Flintstones was airing for 60 years just on syndicated television, right? They still had it. It was still on the network. It wasn't spliced in, you know, with all the shows throughout. No. But I think that they had a different formula for the programming and for the schedule, and I think they wanted to try something new. And I'll tell you what, I think it worked. You know? I think it did. I really did think it worked. Right? When I chat with millennial friends around my age who only casually followed Cartoon Network back in the day, they always bring up the cartoons up to Teen Titans and Foster's Home. Some do bring up High and Puffy Yumi, some bring up Ben 10, but after that they skip all the way to Adventure Time regular show Steven Universe. Hardly any of them bring up the '05 to '08 shows debuting, like Chowder or Flapjack, blah blah blah. I did enjoy Duck Dodgers and Camp Lazlo, but sadly I hardly, and that's fair, right? But that's just par for the course. That's just, like, look at Robotomy. That show was pretty funny. Look at Symbionic Titan. That show was great. Nobody talks about these shows. And look, we all can sit here and talk about Megas XLR. All of us. All of us. Because we all love Cartoon Network. Let's go to a party somewhere, right? With guys our age that probably haven't seen Cartoon Network since it came out. Are any of them remembering Megas XLR? Probably if you bring it up to them and you show them the opening, right? Maybe show them a picture. Oh, yeah, I do remember. Aside from that, you think they're remembering Megas XLR? Probably not, right? So, I'm not shocked that I don't hear some people talk about these. Here's the thing. It doesn't mean people didn't like them at the time when it came out. It doesn't. It doesn't. Like I said, not every show that comes out can be a 10 out of 10. It's just statistically impossible. So unfortunately, those 7 out of 10s, those 8 out of 10s, those maybe even 6, 5 out of 10s, they're gonna get forgotten for the 10 out of 10s that come out in that era. It's just a fact, right? Doesn't mean that they're bad shows. It's just the competition was too tough, right? Let me get some more water real quick. Long video, but it's okay. City era definitely had good points. None of the shows introduced in this era were bad. There was a good amount of variety, both originals and acquisitions, in the lineup. And the overall packaging and feel of the network during this time made it feel lively and fun to watch. Even if the City era didn't reach the heights of the Powerhouse era, the channel still felt fresh and still had plenty worth tuning into. But I also feel that the City era was when Cartoon Network didn't feel like it had any real direction or focus compared to the Powerhouse era. Okay, he keeps saying this. I want to know what he thinks the direction or focus was of the Powerhouse era. Because I gotta be honest, aside from just making good shows and doing what they always did, I don't see a direction or focus difference from Powerhouse to City. I don't really know what he's talking about here, if I'm being honest. And he keeps saying the City era didn't reach the heights of the Powerhouse era. What was the height of the Powerhouse era that you think, in your opinion, the City era couldn't reach? I'm not getting enough information here for his side of the argument. I don't know. I don't really know I just don't know what he's talking about. But I also feel the City era was when Cartoon Network didn't feel like any real direction focus compared to the Powerhouse era. Even Michael Auline, current Cartoon Network president, admitted that Cartoon Network struggled to figure out what it was as a brand after Adult Swim took off. Was he around at the time? I don't know. I disagree. And again, I would have to... I don't even know. I haven't even seen that quote. I don't even know if this is true. I'd have to look into that. But again, that's Michael's opinion. Right? And when he says Adult Swim took off, what does that mean to Michael Auline? Just because when Adult Swim went full 24 hours, which, by the way, wasn't until, like, what? 05? 06? Was when it went a full 24 hours? Or not a full 24 hours, I'm sorry. Full 7 days a week? 05? I think? Maybe 04. Could have been 04. I know it was during City era. And just because that's when it happened, what does he mean by Adult Swim took off? Took off could mean financially to him and the company, which that didn't happen till like 2013 when Rick and Morty was really coming out, and they had that identity, right? And again, He says, okay, here's another problem with the argument, is he says, struggle to figure out what it was after brand. Oh, wait, after Adult Swim took off. Okay, I see. I thought he said until Adult Swim took off. Again, I don't know. I agree. Here's the thing. If we're talking about Cartoon Network now, which I think that's what he's talking about, actually. Because if we're talking about Cartoon Network now, I'd 100% agree with this. I really would. Because Adult Swim has now taken up a majority of the schedule. I think that right now, Cartoon Network is trying to figure out what it is. I think the Cartoon Network's been trying to figure out what it is for the past 10 years. I also think, man, this cough's getting worse. I'm talking too much. I also think the problem with this era was Cartoon Network putting too much focus on quantity over quality. I also disagree. They naively assumed just having more shows would give them ratings. I don't know if they thought that at all. And I mean, that's not even true. Look at the checkerboard era. They had more shows during the checkerboard era than they knew what to do with. Seriously, 2004-2006, Cartoon Network felt like it was premiering a new show almost every month, compared to Nick and Disney during that period, who both focused more on having good, successful shows rather than a lot of shows. I just disagree. I just disagree. I mean, like I said, Disney and Nick had a couple of good shows during this time. Absolutely. So did Cartoon Network. That's why I'm saying we're dealing with apples and oranges here. I think that combined with all of the changes at the network contributed to See and Die in 2004 statement from old school fans. But of course they're going to say that, right? That's just how people are. Say what you want. Say what you will about Snyder these days. About the Snyder days, cartoons at least had a firm direction under him. I just don't know if I agree. I just don't. We'll never know because Jim Samples had to forcibly resign in like 2007. So we'll never know what could have happened with Samples. I couldn't disagree more with this. And I couldn't disagree more with this because, like I said, there's too much of him. And again, please, highest of respects to Mr. Man Guy. I love different opinions, and I love hearing opinions about something that I love that are negative. And again, he doesn't hate it. He even says that he thinks it is great, good amount of variety. He's just giving some critiques. I don't understand what the critique is of. Well, Powerhouse had direction and City doesn't. But like, there's not really any real examples, right? And he'll say like, well, they had some shows that didn't do well. Okay, well, so did every era. Nick and Disney had some good shows coming out around that time too. Good for them. I'm glad that's called competition. That's healthy. That's healthy for any company, any businesses. You want that healthy competition. Helps drive sales for both competitors, right? Remember when Sonic and Wendy's, I think it was Sonic, were doing like that that battle, right? Where they were like talking crap about each other's businesses in their signage. That raised profits for both companies by a ton, right? Because that's what you call healthy competition. To them, it's nothing serious, right? They don't care about what Wendy's has to say about Sonic's double cheeseburger. They don't care. But they know that type of engagement with their fans of both audiences, right? If I'm a customer and I always go to Wendy's, right? And I see Wendy's comes out and publicly talks a mess about Sonic, I might feel inclined to go to a Sonic to get food. Because I want to see what my favorite restaurant, Wendy's, is talking about. They say it's a bad cheeseburger. Let me go try it out. Let me see if it is bad. Vice versa with Sonic fans to Wendy's, right? I mean, that's just healthy competition in any business. I don't see how Nick and Disney having also having popular and good shows at the time is an issue. Because again, they had so much going on. Cartoon Network had so much going on at the time too. I just don't think that this is very fair, to be honest. We've been going for almost an hour, so I'm gonna get ready to wrap this up. Again, props to Mr. Man Guy. High respects for your opinions, bro. High respect for everyone in here. But I just wanted to make a video on it. I just kind of want to make a video response to this Toon Zone forum post here. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the Cartoon Network City era really wasn't that great? Leave those comments in the description box down below. Let me know what you guys think. And yeah, feel free to leave your comments down below. Let me know exactly how you feel. You can hate City. That's fine. Totally get it. Leave your comments down below, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, y'all.
Thanks so much to Ryan Wilkins, Kame Senin, and Susan Simone for all becoming members. If you would also like to become a member, on my channel there exists multiple different tier levels, and you can pick out which one is best for you.